Is college athletics entering its wildest era yet?
From transfer portal frenzy to coaching carousel chaos, the silly season has officially begun.
Big names like USC quarterback Miller Moss are already narrowing down their next moves before the transfer portal even opens,
giving athletes leverage to negotiate their NIL deals for maximum impact.
Meanwhile, coaching buyouts are costing schools millions, with programs making bold investments to stay competitive.
In today's episode, we'll also cover the groundbreaking Players Era Festival, where athletes earned $9 million in NIL payouts, proving that the NCAA is truly entering a player-driven era.
Is this chaos the new normal?
Will NIL incentives reshape bowl games and beyond?
Tune in as we unpack the future of college athletics during its most transformative season yet.
But before we do so, make sure you like this video, subscribe to our channel, and ring that notification bell so that you never miss a future episode.
With that being said, we hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back to the NIL Era Podcast. My name is Elise, Byun.
And I'm Fernando, Andrade. In last week's episode, we covered the flipping of a top recruit in Bryce Underwood. You can go check that out, episode 23. But today, this week, we have the time of football transfer portal approaching, as well as the coaching carousel. Welcome to the silly season. Elise, let's kick things off per usual. As we're recording this episode, the transfer portal has not yet opened for football. They will officially be open the day this episode gets released, which is Monday, December 9th. So as of right now, which is Wednesday, December 4th, what are we seeing?
So much like you see with the NBA and NFL trades and free agencies, there are now accounts like On3, Front Office Sports, ESPN, 24/7 Sports, and other just major sports news accounts releasing transfer portal updates and breaking news. Some of the top names who announced their free agency and transfer portal jump within college athletics and specifically college football are Miller Moss, the QB from USC, Hank Brown, the QB from Auburn, Ashton Daniels, QB from Stanford, and so many more. So for my initial thoughts, this is just one confirming the age we are in within college athletics. Every year, we will continue to see this silly season of transfers. Unless there's a contract you sign, hopefully we see this when revenue share starts, but athletes will have the freedom to leave as they please. Second, I think it's smart for these athletes to announce their intention to transfer early. Like Fernando, you just said, it opens on December 9th, but by them announcing it through kind of news platforms and accounts like On3 and things like that, it helps give other coaches that are looking to recruit a little more extra time to prepare, both for the team that you're leaving and the team that you're kind of looking into. But something even more interesting is On3 and 24/7 Sports and other accounts are already announcing how some athletes have already set their eyes on maybe their top 5 programs that they're interested in transferring to. For example, Miller Moss, the QB of USC, has his eyes set on Michigan, Auburn, Iowa, and Louisville. So that leads me to kind of my third thought. At first, I was really confused, I would say, and kind of surprised that it would already be announced because, like we've talked about before, of the tampering in the portal, all of that, I thought since it opened on December 9th, like he wasn't in the portal yet, and that just shows tampering is happening if he's already kind of narrowed it down to 4 or 5 schools. But grad transfers, which Miller Moss is and a lot of the other guys who already announced are, they're allowed to enter the portal earlier than that December 9th opening date, which means Miller Moss is already in the portal and already talking to coaches. So the people you see who are posting on Instagram and say they aren't a grad transfer, I would assume they aren't in the portal yet, which again is a little confusing because people are like, oh yeah, I'm in the portal, and they're not yet. But my fourth point here also, I think it gives the players who are staying at certain schools the ability to renegotiate NIL packages. Just using this as an example, because today, in the day that we're recording, December 4th, was also National Signing Day for football recruits. So just using this as an example, but Cal football sadly lost a 5-star QB recruit to Oregon today. And if Fernando Mendoza, our starting QB, decides to jump in the portal, Cal is left with a huge loss offensively. And I think this gives Mendoza a lot of leverage to up whatever NIL package he currently has. Yes, Justin Wilcox can go jump in the portal as well and find a QB out of the portal or have our second string QB step up. But there is also just a lot of, I think, a lot of success with Fernando as QB1. You've built the culture there. So I think it is top priority to retain Mendoza as our QB1. And you saw it with how the agent Jimmy Sexton, he negotiated college football coaching contracts for a lot of the top college football head coaches. And especially after Nick Saban retired, he was upping his clients' salaries as stability and locking them into not leaving for this Bama job opening like he did with Dan Lanning at Oregon. So I will be interested to see if these football student athletes who are staying at their school, if they decide to try and renegotiate and get some more money, because I think if we're kind of just looking at the landscape, that wouldn't be a bad idea to do with all of this silliness going on.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing here is how announcing your intentions can be used to your advantage. So I don't think there's anything against announcing your intentions, saying, you know what, I want to transfer. And this can be used to your advantage negotiation wise in many ways. First off, you can start gaining the attention of other programs, of other coaches, of other scouts without actually entering the portal. Legally, you can't be contacted by them, but at least you're gaining their attention. And with your current program, with your current coach, you can also start negotiating with them. You know what? I'm not in the transfer portal yet. I haven't lost my spot on the team yet, but I do want to leave. If you want to keep me, pay up, right? Like that's how it could be used to your advantage. That's negotiation 101. It's nothing too crazy there. What I do love about this though is how grad transfers have the option of entering the portal early. I think this is really healthy for two reasons. First off, it's not like a regular transfer. I think grad transfers must be recognized and acknowledged for completing their 3 or 4 years at a program, at a school, and getting their degree. I think that's extremely valuable. That should be applauded and that should be given priority because it's not like any other transfer. There's loyalty there. There's your education there. I think that's great. You should be given priorities. The same way that student athletes are giving priority enrollment when it comes to classes, I think priority for the transfer portal is a great thing for grad transfers. When it comes to regular transfers, it is very interesting how you can just announce things and play around with it and flirt with this idea and poke here, poke there, because you do start negotiating and it's a complicated world. It's getting closer to bigger contracts, just like pro athletes, the way they poke around, the way they play around, they need to do this. It's part of the negotiation. You see it even during season with pro athletes. It's something they do. So I'm not too surprised by any of this, but it will be interesting to see how this starts to continue to progress towards towards professional sports, because this is a humongous aspect of it, which is negotiations, negotiating for what school you want to represent. And eventually there will be contracts, and that'll be a whole other mess, because being on a contract to attend a school, I don't know how that would work. But for now, I am interested though. Why would a football player want to transfer? Like what's the point there besides the money? Like what are you seeing? If you were a recruit yourself in the portal looking to transfer, what would you want to do?
Well, first, if I were to look to transfer, I wouldn't transfer to Michigan as a QB or any other program who just spent an arm and a leg on a PSA in any position that they just signed, because I can't see a world where a transfer portal guy gets a starting job over a $10 million recruit. But I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I hope it is. Second, while NIL contracts and revenue contracts now are in the picture, we need to learn from our mistakes. Everything needs to be in writing. Everything you've ever been promised in the recruiting process, everything has to be in writing. Everything has to have a documentation. I think that is first and foremost. So we can kind of minimize the PSAs or transfers or whoever it is, student athletes on this team, to get screwed over in the end, because that is something that we have consistently been seeing coming up. And that's something that has to change now. And hoping with this next cycle, it does change. Third, I think Sion James from Duke, and that episode we had recorded, one of my favorite episodes, he had just one of the best anecdotes coming out of the portal as a grad transfer. Some of these transfers have only 1 or 2 more years of eligibility left, and most have aspirations to go pro. You are going to be offered a lot of money in the portal, but like Sion had said, he isn't thinking about the NIL money here. He is thinking about what will best set him up for the NBA, that next step. So I think for these people in the portal, think about the long-term decisions, whether that's about your sport and going pro or about your education. Miller Moss, when he announced his intention to transfer as a grad transfer, in his statement, he had thanked one of his USC professors actually in like his honors thesis and all of this stuff. And you just saw the level of gratitude he had not only for the USC football program, but also the education at USC. And I think that is also that recruits can really use to their advantage as a grad transfer. You can do a certificate program, or you can try and get into a master's program and do a little higher education as well. And I think that's great. Even for myself, when I was getting recruited, like that's something that I was always looking into. How can I use my gymnastics to get me into a school and be at a program that I wouldn't be able to get into if I wasn't a gymnast? And I know that's obviously not the aspirations for a lot of student athletes, especially these football student athletes. But I think when you're in the portal, think long term, think not just this year, not the money that is being presented to you right in front of your face. And obviously that is a lot easier said than done. But the long-term decisions, I think, are going to be able to rationalize your next 1 to 2 years of eligibility.
Essentially, there are 3 types of student athletes in the transfer portal. Those that are trying to transfer to make it to the pro leagues and step it up. Those that are trying to transfer to make money that they aren't going to make when they don't go pro and that they can only make when they are in college. And those looking to get into a program that they just could not get into just academically as students. And I think it's very important to make those distinctions, because while some student athletes such as Sion are focused on getting to the NBA, there are other student athletes that will never make it to the NBA, and they have to make their money now, because realistically, some of these student athletes will never see the same amount of money ever again in their life. So it's try and make as much money as possible that'll be life-changing for them and their family. And for others, it's the exact same situation when it comes to a program. I'm sure that a top QB1 could find a way to sneak into an MBA program at a top university, for example. That is life-changing in terms of networking and the opportunities that could come right after graduation if the NFL, for example, just doesn't work out for them. So there's plenty of ways to use this. It doesn't necessarily have to be for pro sports. It doesn't necessarily have to be for the money. There's plenty of ways to do this, and it'll be exciting to see how this transfer portal works out. To your previous point, I think something that is very interesting will be what happens contracts-wise, though, because if people aren't signing agreements, you can get taken advantage of. Let's look at UNLV's quarterback, right? This is something we've seen over and over again this season. We've talked about it with plenty of people off the record as well. If you aren't signing agreements, if it's only a verbal agreement, there's nothing there to back up what you were meant to be paid by a collective, by your program, or even in NIL deals. But once there are contracts, you then run the risk of getting fired, which will be an entirely new concept for student athletes and for college students in general to get fired, maybe from a program or maybe even from the school, because if they aren't on scholarship, they can't afford to be there. So that'll be an entirely new concept for student athletes. But getting fired is not a new concept for college coaches. And that's something we're seeing a lot of in this silly season. Why is that?
So the coaching carousel is just as important as the transfer portal updates, in my opinion. Football coaches and their contracts are instrumental to the development of not only your program, but your athletic department as a whole. And this year's coaching carousel is just getting started. CBS Sports reports that we're up to 20 changes in the FBS following the regular season, but only 4 jobs and power conferences are open. It's expected to be a historically slow cycle for the power conferences, but that isn't stopping the AAC, arguably the strongest non-power league, from shaking things up. 6 programs had made changes at the top to culminate a wild year in the conference where Army and Navy made headlines for their hot starts before first-year coach John Sumrall pushed Tulane into the conference title game to face the Black Knights. The SEC remains the only power conference without a change at head coach, although the coaching carousel has just begun spinning. So that's explaining the job openings and how many positions. But with that comes the terminating of contracts and buying out these coaches. As of Monday afternoon, which is December 2nd, 15 FBS head coaches had been fired during the season or since it ended Saturday, which schools owing more than $36 million in buyout fees. That's a sharp decrease from last year's sum of more than $118 million, led by the $76 million that the Texas A&M had to pay out to Jimbo Fisher. Here are the best known college football coaching buyouts in 2024. West Virginia, Neil Brown, $9.77 million, and Purdue head coach Ryan Walters, $9.34 million. These buyouts and the commitment that schools will go for a strong football program is clearly shown. In a hypothetical that, let's say, Ryan Day, the head coach of Ohio State, let's say he gets fired after his 4th straight loss to Michigan this past weekend, his buyout is more than $37 million. So is 4 losses to Michigan worth $37 million? And if it is, where does Ryan Day go next? And what movement does that trigger of an OSU head coach opening? And the investment to find a great coach is there. Sportico just released the top 50 highest paid coaches in U.S. sports, and NFL and NBA dominate the top of the rankings within the first 10 spots. But college football landed the most overall with 21 coaches in the top 50. So clearly there is a demand for great college football coaches because, like I said, it not only impacts your football program, it impacts an athletic department and thus so much more that goes into it. So the coaching carousel is just getting started, and I think we're going to see a lot of changes, a lot of switch ups, and I'm excited to see what happens next there.
I mean, this is just absolutely ridiculous in terms of the buyout money that is just wasted right there, because you see so many colleges and even conferences complaining, we don't have enough money. We need more money. We need money to pay student athletes or to even cover flights across the nation, to cover all these expenses. And then you just like $9 million down the drain right there. The Texas A&M one was ridiculous. Like, that's an insane amount of money. And I know media rights deals, well, I mean, some of them aren't even worth as much as the Texas A&M one, right? But the other ones, I mean, what is it? A third of that is going away to these coaches at $9 million. That's a lot of money. So it's just insane how poor some of these decisions are. No way on earth losing to Michigan is worth $37 million. You need a ridiculous amount of money for that to be actually worth it. And I'm not sure any university has that themselves. Collectives are a different thing, but the universities themselves to just be able to say, oh, 4 losses to Michigan, yeah, that's worth $37 million on top of what I'm going to pay another head coach. I'm not too sure about that. And this is an issue that's being seen across sports. I don't know what you think on that, but I think it's terrible in negotiating.
I agree with that. I think it's also interesting, like the pros and cons that really go into firing a head coach. The Purdue head coach, I think they didn't really have a choice. Like, it was a $9 million buyout, but he went 0-10 in Big Ten play. They went 1-11 or something like that. It was insane. Like, some of these coaches are leaving ADs no choice but to fire them. I think the Ryan Day situation would be so interesting if they end up doing something about it, because for the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, like, that is all they care about. Like you have people saying, even if we have a losing season, if we beat Michigan, that's a winning season. And the fact that they have lost 4 straight to Michigan, and this past loss, I think really hurting them, of an unranked Michigan, is tough to say the least. And for the Purdue case, like if they were to keep him as head coach, no shot people would want to buy season tickets. No shot people would have hope for this Purdue football team. And I think that is the tricky part of the pros and cons of, is this worth a $9 million decision? I think for Purdue, I think it was. Couple years ago, 4 years ago, maybe, they were in the Big Ten championship game, and now they are dead last in the Big Ten. Like, that is a big jump within 4 years. That for that AD, $9 million was worth this decision.
I mean, it's just doing the math, right? So if you look at Purdue, I would assume that this decision was made logically and saying, all right, $9 million down the drain, but if I keep this guy moving forward, this is what it will cost me in terms of season ticket buyers, in terms of support, in terms of the collective, in terms of recruiting, all these things. So maybe that makes sense. But when you look at Ryan Day, what was Ohio State ranked in that game? Weren't they like number 3?
Second, third.
They were
second.
They were number 2 in the nation. And over one game, you're going to say, oh yeah, 37 million down the drain. No. And that's the issue all sports fans have. For a fan to say that coach should get fired because he lost a rivalry game 4 seasons in a row is not to consider the business that goes on behind the game. $37 million for 4 games in 4 years is absurd. It just is absurd. Number 2 in the nation. And to have one single game ruin your entire season, I don't care how passionate you are, that's $37 million. That's an entire media rights deal for a conference. That's what destroyed the Pac-12. No way on earth is that worth it. And I think it's an issue in college football, and it's also an issue in college basketball, which we'll start seeing very shortly because the season is underway. We also have the bowl season for football underway, and I'm sure there will be many of decisions coming in after those bowl games. And even recently, there was this inaugural Players Era Festival held in Vegas. I personally have no idea what this was. So could you tell me a bit about this tournament?
Yeah, so the Players Era Festival is the first of its kind. So the 2024 Player Era's NCAA men's basketball tournament was a groundbreaking event held from November 26th through the 30th in Las Vegas at the MGM Grand Garden Arena. Branded as the Players Era Festival, it featured 8 top college teams, including a ranked Alabama, Houston, Texas A&M, and Creighton. This tournament was unique for its focus on providing substantial NIL opportunities, offering $9 million to participating athletes through various promotional and educational engagements. So from the website, it says, in addition to the $1 million in NIL opportunities per team earned from engaging in events separate and distinct from the team's participation in the festival games, there will also be opportunities for additional NIL compensation for teams and players after competing in Saturday's championship and third place games. The enhanced NIL value of these teams' players will be recognized by Players Era and its sponsors with the opportunity to engage in NIL activities after the games while the players are still on call. So, again, first of its kind. Was this event successful? It's an easy yes. I talked to one of the men's basketball players who had played in this tournament. He had said that all of them had signed a contract beforehand and that the tournament overall was just really well done. Along with raving reviews from coaches of these teams that participated, it was also reported that there were 3 overtime affairs in games and 5 games decided by 5 points or fewer. So very competitive games. And in going 3-0, Oregon won $500,000 in additional NIL money, while Alabama was awarded a bonus $250,000, San Diego State an additional $150,000, and Houston an additional $100K. So those 4 schools, plus Creighton, Notre Dame, Rutgers, and Texas A&M, will all be paid $1 million.
paid for winning?
So those top, it was Oregon, Bama, SDSU, and Houston all got awarded extra money for how they did in the tournament.
So for winning, not for NIL, for winning. Okay, because the comment says NIL, and that's where I'm going to have to step in and say that is not NIL whatsoever. If you're telling me, oh, we're signing contracts after the game, totally, yeah, brand it as NIL. That is pay for play. That is prize money. In soccer specifically, when you're in college soccer, you are very strictly told, don't go and play for prize money tournaments when you're not in season, because that is a thing. There are prize money tournaments that are quote unquote amateur in just regular tournaments that happen all around. It's just people competing for money. You're not allowed to do that. You're just not allowed to do that. So again, if you want to do that, if that's what's going to give you competitive games in overtime and 5-point games, fantastic. Change the rules then. Change the rules because that's against the rules.
So I'm guessing that extra $500K, it went to their program. That's what I'm guessing. Because from what I read, expenses were covered, flights were covered, all of that. So I'm guessing this extra money went to the program. I'm wondering if it got distributed and whatnot amongst players. I wonder if that is in the contract. I'd be interesting to see if it were, but there was this prize money. And I think that's why games were so good. Yes, it was very competitive teams, but also it is that incentive there too.
Well, yeah, but the comment said this tournament was unique for its focus on providing substantial NIL opportunities, offering $9 million to participating athletes through various promotional and educational engagements. So is that completely separate then to what we're talking about with this money? So
from what I can gather, they did the autograph signings, they did appearances all at this tournament. So this tournament was a week long. I'm pretty sure they were there for a week during Thanksgiving break. And it is clearly a lot more than basketball. They did a lot more than basketball. These games were on TNT, I believe. So there was a media rights component as well. This was a very interesting tournament. And like I said, the first of its kind, and they're already renewing for 2025 and has already signed some great schools to join.
I think it's fantastic. Again, what I'm very much against is just update the rules. Just update the rules. Until you don't, you allow for there to be wiggle room for things to not work out. And I'm talking about this from the lens of the student athlete, by the way, because that's how you can be taken advantage of and exploited as a student athlete. When there isn't something written down, it's the same concept as the contracts. When there aren't rules that specifically allow you to say, oh, I can make money from this, or I can't, that becomes an issue. Because you may think, oh, this money was going for me. Actually, no, this extra money, it's just for the program. So when those rules are played out and every state has different rules and every university has different rules, it just becomes a mess. As soon as you update them, that can work. Because for the promotional stuff, for example, you're there for a week. Of course, you're not playing or practicing the entire time. Sign your contracts. I think that's fantastic. That's awesome. That's an efficient use of time. But in terms of performance,
well, that's the same thing with March Madness. The further you get in the tournament, the more money your conference gets, the more money your school gets. Same thing. Yeah,
but they don't brand it as NIL money. That's the thing.
But we don't know. This is I would be very interested to see from any of those programs if that prize money went directly to the program or the players. Because if it goes directly to the program, that's like the March Madness tournament. Goes to your conference. Same exact thing. So I'm assuming that's what happened. But from there, it's, I guess, up to the discretion of the program. Not that revenue share has gone into effect. So if they're holding on to it until next year, and we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's interesting.
But you see what I'm saying? I don't think it should be up to the discretion of the program. If you, as a program, get the prize money, that's your money. You keep it. Don't give it to the athletes, because that isn't NIL.
They probably won't. They probably won't.
Yeah, it would be weird if they do, But when it's not written down and when it's branded as NIL money, that's the type of issue I'm talking about, because there will be a student athlete that comes out and says, well, I signed this contract before and I misunderstood what we were talking about. Where's my money? And it's the same issue you're seeing with small deals, but now you're seeing it in competition. That's where it's a mess. That's where there's no clarity. That's why I'm against it. I'm not against the action. I'm against there not being a rule that says A, B, C, this is what we're going to do. 1, 2, 3. That's what we need. That's what we need. And I think it's a great initiative, though. I think this is fantastic, especially the contract signing. You're there for a week, might as well make use of it. So mixed feelings, a good start moving forward. I would love to see the updates for 2025, but realistically, we can't continue talking on this much because it's out of ignorance at this point. It'd be best to just read the contract and see what there is there, or hopefully have a student athlete that played in the tournament on the podcast. That would be awesome to just chat about how this works and everything about this tournament.
I think just looking at it also, to me, when I saw this, it just like really resembled and aligned with the NBA Cup in-season tournament, with now that like monetary incentive and kind of like a neutral site with this being in Vegas and just great marketing and eyeballs. And like I said, the 2025 Players Era Festival already has some great names like Gonzaga, Baylor. And when we're recording this December 4th, Michigan just announced its involvement with other top teams committed as well for the 2025 festival there. And I know like we're getting into the ending of football season and thus bowl eligibilities and seeing those bowl games. I think this could also be a possibility for the football bowl games that we're seeing. In the past few years, we've been seeing the starting QB or wide receiver sit out of a bowl game. But if you decide to add an NIL incentive to it, to opt in and play in this bowl game, maybe, like you said, maybe not as a prize money, but to at least play, that is a way to keep it interesting until the last game of the season. But overall, like, I think this just shows how the Players Era Festival, it's just forward thinking in a new era that we're in. We truly are entering a players era of the NCAA. It's no longer the landscape it was 10 years ago, let alone 5 years ago. And we talked about it earlier, the Purdue football head coach, and now the AD, of course, is looking for a new football head coach. And in a press conference, he had said that the last 2.5 to 3 years for that within the NIL world, the way it evolved was very different. And honestly, that world did not advantage Purdue. Our folks don't necessarily respond warmly to the way NIL has evolved in the recent past, but that's going to change as we move forward. And I think that will bring the world back to us in a very positive way. There will be a very well-resourced position who will participate fully in the revenue share situation. That is a commitment that Purdue has made, and we will intend to provide our coaches. Obviously, we're talking about the football today with a very much a level playing field with people that they're competing against from a revenue share perspective. So that will be a very big positive. So we're just in this new era. And now I think there is a buy-in. We're too much into it for you to be like, let's go back to the old ways. And I think earlier, even just in the football season in this academic year, you were seeing a lot of ADs, coaches, maybe even some student athletes at these schools not grasping, but like wanting to stay in this old era. And I think this Players Era Festival and just what's happening in the landscape in the recent weeks, months, we're very much so in a new era. And now you are seeing ADs and coaches get with it in the sense that this is our new reality and compete in this new reality, or you will be getting left behind.
Again, let's go back to the incentives, the NBA Cup, and this option for a bowl game to have financial incentives to play in the bowl game when you're a QB or wide receiver that could be going to the league. That's not NIL money anyways. That's still prize money, and prize money by definition is pay for play. And I think people need to accept not that we're in the NIL era, that this is becoming pro sports. Yeah. There is no way this doesn't become a pro sport. absolutely no way. And a pro sport, by definition, means if you play, you get paid. That's what it means. That is what it means. And that's, again, I'll repeat myself, what I am against. Do not call it NIL money. There is no way on earth, hey, if you play this bowl game, you'll get paid. That's not NIL money. And why do I get paid for the bowl game and not the rest of these games this entire season? Is this just the bonus? Maybe the only argument they could say is that the bowl games are separate to the conference games. So, conference has a rule that says you can't get paid, but the bowl games will pay you. That's fine. But that is not NIL. NIL is waiting outside of the stadium, regardless of your playing time, and signing signing autographs for fans. That is NIL. Adding a financial incentive to play is everything that college sports is against when it comes to these specific things. That's why there's loyalty. That is why the fans go crazy over their team and continue to come back for the big game, even if they live outside of the city. If you just set up the rules so that it's not only QB1 getting paid, but then other guys getting paid as well, then yeah, just develop it into a pro situation, because that's what it is. But if you half-ass it, it's going to become a huge issue and it's going to create all sorts of problems. So might as well not only accept NIL, like you're saying, we're already in this world. No, we're not in the NIL world. We're in the pro sports world. We're stepping into the pay-for-play world. Accept it with open arms, because to not do so is to just delay things. And the people that delay things are just going to fall behind and they will be non-competitive. And we're seeing this because, again, revenue share, by definition, is pay for play. And pay for play, by definition, is pro sports. I'm totally for it. The only thing I'm against is not calling it what it is.
Yeah, so let's call it what it is. We'll see what happens. Soon. It'll happen soon.
That's where we need the lawmakers to come in. That's where we need some voices to step up, because I am not at all. I would not be surprised at all for a state to come out and say, pay for play is totally legal here. In the state of Louisiana, pay for play is totally legal. Come play for the LSU Tigers. I could see that happening soon. And if people don't step up, if it doesn't become a federal thing, if it doesn't become a national thing, that's going to start happening. And the level field that's remaining will die. But that is for the future. That is something to keep an eye out for. It's exciting times with basketball approaching, exciting times with bowl games approaching, exciting times with the new playoff system for football. So we'll see how that goes. That'll be really good. It'll be fun to keep up with the podcast. We'll have some guests here and there. We'll have some reviews for the end of the year. And of course, we will be very much close to this podcast for the end of year and start of year bowl games, as well as March Madness as it continues to approach. But I think that is it for today.
Yep.
Awesome. So thank you guys so much. To anybody that watched on YouTube, please make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel. It truly, truly, truly makes a difference. Share this episode with whoever you think would find it valuable. If you're on Spotify, please follow the podcast. It truly does make a difference. That is it for today. And per usual, we will see you all next Monday.
Bye.